What is the impact and what are the consequences of corruption?
In terms of the consequences, you know that where corruption is pervasive, it will not surprise you if I tell you that the business community and individuals are going to basically see paying taxes as a bad business, right? As something that you probably should avoid doing, right? In other words, one of the first things is that corruption undermines government revenue. We have many examples of this all over the world. Now, if it undermines government revenue, then one of the implications is that the state will have less resources to spend on those things that really matter, whether it's education, infrastructure, public health, and so on. It will curtail the ability of the state to spend in those areas which are going to improve productivity, improve competitiveness, right? It also undermines an implicit contract that exists between the state and especially the business community, right? Because look, there is always a tension between the role of the state as the tax collector on the one hand, and the role of the business community and the individual, as the one who has to fulfill its tax obligations and abide by the law. And so people and businesses want to feel that they're getting some benefit out of the taxes that they're paying. Right? If corruption is endemic, then this contract, it basically collapses, and the business community feels very justified in going out of its way not to pay taxes or to find creative ways not to pay taxes. Furthermore, I said before that corruption undermines government revenue. What does this mean in macroeconomic terms? It means that if revenue is going to be less than it would otherwise be the case, then one option is that the deficit is going to be higher, the budget deficit. And if the budget deficit is going to be higher, then it means that your public debt is going to be higher. It means you're going to be paying more interest on your public debt, and that's in turn going to affect, what other spendings you can do in those areas which are good for the economy. And if it doesn't lead to an increase in the budget deficit, then that means that you basically have to increase taxes. But if you increase taxes to offset the declining revenue associated with corruption, then this has implications for the kinds of incentives which exist in the economy. And high taxes in particular provide all kinds of disincentives, in terms of labor supply and there is a large body of empirical evidence that suggests that, for instance, high taxes contribute to lower investment and lower economic growth in particular.
And also, if you allow me, as you were saying before, bad high taxes can also foster corruption.
Exactly, right. Because it leads to tax evasion and it leads to informality and so on. There are also studies that have shown that corruption actually depresses foreign direct investment. That's not surprising. Your foreign investor, if he's given a choice, other things being equal, is going to prefer to work in a country where he doesn't have to pay bribes. So that's not surprising. And it also, as I said before, leads to higher levels of informality. Now, furthermore, beyond the impact on revenue, it also undermines the growth of the private sector. And here the situations are different. If you are a young entrepreneur and you have an idea, you want to get a business started in a country where there is high level of corruption, you are going to be intimidated, by basically what it means to become a businessman, right? Either you have to pay bribes, or you may be sufficiently intimidated that you will either decide to desist and go and do something else, or if you're really keen on your idea and you think your idea is very promising, you're going to emigrate and you're going to take your idea somewhere else, which of course happens. There is a brain drain and there is a loss of talent in many parts of the developing world because the young entrepreneurs basically want to go and work elsewhere because they're afraid of having to operate in an environment in which to survive they have to break the law. Right? That's fundamentally makes them fundamentally uncomfortable. Right? Of course, higher corruption, increases the cost to business and undermines competitiveness. That is another of the linkages. Also, businesses are, quite ready to operate in an environment of, well-established taxes, because taxes are certain. they're well known, and they can be incorporated into the cost structure of the enterprise. Whereas bribery, which is typically the mechanism of corruption, is by its definition uncertain. You don't know what sort of impact it's going to have into your cost structure if you have to pay bribes to every government official or inspector that comes and knocks on your door. And so it just creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is bad for economic growth. It's also bad, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises, because they don't have the clout, to basically go and talk to a top government official to make sure that the tax inspectors don't come and visit you too often, right? So they're especially vulnerable. And this is bad because small and medium-sized enterprises very often are the engine of job creation and economic growth. And then beyond this, corruption also basically leads to all kinds of inefficiencies, because in a system of corruption, firms, have to spend a great deal of time dealing, with corrupt government officials. They have to have a separate set of books, to account for a different sort of reality, right, than the books that they will be presenting to the tax authorities. So there are a number of activities that are basically implicit, in a country that has levels of corruption, that are going to detract from the efficiency of the enterprise. A couple of other things that we know from the literature is that corruption worsens income distribution. That's a well-established fact. It also, as I said before, leads to uncertainty, because you see there are no enforceable property rights associated with a corrupt transaction, right? If, for instance, you have obtained a mining concession because you have bribed some government official, right? There is nothing that prevents some other government official to come and try to extract a bribe from you, right? The whole point of bribery and corruption is that it is secret, right? So there is no documentation, And so Professor Rose Ackerman, who's one of the leading experts on issues of corruption, gives this very interesting example of Malaysia, where a company obtained illegal logging rights, and because they didn't know how long this right was going to last, there was an incentive to cut as many trees as fast as possible, because maybe within a few months this concession was going to be withdrawn from you. So in a sense, there is a kind of incentive to focus on the short term, which of course is very, very destructive for the economy. These are some of the things that come to mind. I mean, corruption also encourages a kind of a culture of secrecy, which I think is very, very damaging for the society more generally. There is more, unfortunately, but I think that this provides you an overview of what I think are some of the consequences of implications of corruption.